Hello, Guru Nation. Welcome back to another episode. Today's episode, we got a very special guest, Ada George. She's the founder of Eagle Clinical Research, and she's a perfect example of someone who's been in this industry for a good amount of time, built up a lot of experience with the CROs, the big CROs, um, worked her way up, but then started a research site. And she's actually been a client of ours, the SCS. You can see Chris somewhere back here. Um, he's working right now, and Chris is listening, so he might ask questions to you. But Ada's been a client with us for a while with the SCS, maybe like what, 2 years, 3 years,
Almost 2 years, yes. Next month we'll make it 2 years.
almost 2 years, and we really do our best to make sure our clients get studies as quickly as possible. But sometimes it takes longer than others. And for Ada, for whatever reason, it took her a really long time to get studies going. But once they started coming through, it became easier and easier. It just took, for whatever reason, much longer than average with Ada. And I remember we had a lot of conversation while we're trying to figure out what's going on. I know Chicago's somewhat competitive. We can talk about that too. Sometimes it's just luck, also, I think, or the way the circumstances are. Whatever the case is, the point is, Ada site's doing well now, and we got a lot of stories to talk about in the process. In this 2 years, you've learned a lot, right, Ada?
Yes.
You've learned a lot. So, um, just a client success story that didn't start out very great. And I think it's important to be honest and showcase these stories as well, because not everyone's going to be successful within the first 3 months or 4 months. Sometimes it's going to take 12 months, 16 months, although it's a little bit unusual, but we're going to try to figure out how that happened, what Eagle Research is doing now, how Ada got started in research, and then we got a lot of unfinished business to discuss at the end with a sponsor. It's a cautionary tale.
FYI, July 2018 when she started.
July 2018, Chris says, is when
I
we
said
started.
next month, right? Next
That's
month.
going to be 3 years, Ada, not two.
Oh, time flies.
We all fast forwarded 2020. Don't worry.
See,
Everybody.
when you're having fun, time flies.
3 years. So from
3 years as your client.
it took like a year and a half to really like get you stable as a site, right? More or less. So we're going to talk about how you persevered. It takes a special kind of person to not give up. So let's talk about you. Thank you, Ada, for coming on.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.
And so how did you get started in research? Because your LinkedIn profile is very impressive. We're going to have links to the Eagle Clinical Research underneath.
Yes.
Everybody that wants to look at Eagle, you want to try to intern there, you want to try to work there. It's in Chicagoland. Let Ada know, follow them, and reach out to them through the LinkedIn underneath. But
Absolutely.
give us a little bit background about yourself, Ada. How you get started in research?
Well, my story, it's almost straightforward in the sense that I got in a long time ago. So back in 2006, it was a very different industry then. It was the clinical research industry was not very well known. You were typically an insider, and that's how you knew about it. And then when you did begin to tell people about wanting to veer down that path, they had no clue and so could not advise you with regards to that. I lucked onto it. I had just rounded up my biological sciences degree, and a professor of mine had spoken to me about, my plans for the future. This was a very good professor friend of mine, and I was kind of tossing around a few things, and she asked me, had I ever considered research? And I'm like, I want to be in a lab, stuck in somewhere. And she's like, oh, no. It's nothing like that. There's a vast area of careers you can find within research, everything from regulatory to data to quality, and of course, clinical research as we know it. And so I was interested, and she actually was friends with an owner of a smaller CRO. And she said she could introduce me. And so she did. And they, of course, coming from her, being recommended by her, they were willing to bring me on board and train me. And so that's how I trained first as a clinical trial assistant in-house. And then eventually I started to shadow and monitor other CRAs, and eventually became a field CRA myself. But the one thing about that company was it really was project-based. And so your ability to be in the field was really based upon what project was available. And so I decided to seek an opportunity that would be more consistent. And I was able to join one of the top CROs in the industry then and still now. And I was with them for a couple of years before I moved on to join an actual pharmaceutical company. And so throughout the years, I've been able to be part of CROs as well as major pharmaceutical companies. And I've had the opportunity to experience different therapeutic areas and actually specialize. I get a lot of contacts from companies for some of my specialty areas because they're very much niche, like ophthalmology. It's very much a niche. And so that's one of the things that you have to be a little careful about, because once you have a specialty, they want to keep you in that specialty. But I was lucky to have a wide breadth from vaccines to respiratory to oncology, ophthalmology. And so I've been in the industry now for about, I would say about 15, 16 years, hardcore as a clinical researcher. Having seen both sides from inside pharmaceutical companies, working, managing studies inside, being a CTA, being a field monitor, and going out and working with sites. I'd seen every aspect you can think of in research and understood how it was operating. And so I thought, what would it be like to be an owner of a clinical study,
when did that idea start forming? Because not every CRA ever gets that idea.
About 10 years in, 2016.
Wow.
And I would, go to these sites and kind of like just try to drop some, little questions to the coordinators and the PIs in terms of how they got started. Are they operating under a network? Are they independent? Just try to get a feel of what it was like running these sites. But I wasn't ever able to get, really fleshed out answers. And so I started looking online, doing some research, and one name kept coming up. And that's yours truly. And so I started watching a lot of your videos, and especially the ones that spoke to site owners, because you have a lot of content with CRAs. I'm already one, so it was great. Sometimes you learn new things because you always learn something from a fellow CRA, but I was really interested in being a site owner and seeing if that was even a possibility. And so watching your videos gave me a little bit of hope that there's a possibility, but I knew I needed to take the next step, and that was to eventually reach out to you.
Yes, and and we'll get into that. But now that you've been a site owner for almost 3 years, right? Or maybe a little longer.
I am officially an owner for 3 years, but not active the entire 3 years, yes.
Right. So now you've worked at sponsor level, CRO level, and now site as an entrepreneur. Which one do you like the most?
So, there's pros and cons, right? And I think there's something to be said about being an owner of your own business. Now, I've been a consultant as a CRA. That's still a one-man job. And you're going out there, you're doing what you got to do, and you're done. That's very different from being an owner and walking into your clinic, seeing your staff, being approached by people. I think there's a difference in the way people approach you. They interact and engage with you. And I don't know if it's just the fact that they know that this is a very serious venture. And they also know there are so many things that we can offer and provide, not just doctors, but hospitals and the patients themselves. So it's a very different feeling being an owner of an actual structure
Yeah.
of a clinic.
And you know what? We talk to a CRA probably every week that wants to start a site. And they all assume that they're going to do well as a site owner because they know the industry so well. And I always tell them, look, we've had many a CRA reach out to us. From our experiences, that there's no guarantee that just because you're a CRA that you're going to make a good site owner. Oftentimes that all that structure that you've had, especially at big CROs, works against you because when you start your own site, there is no structure. You have to create the structure. There's nobody telling you what to do, or you didn't fill out your report properly. I mean, you're creating everything from scratch. And it's good to have someone like us helping you, but even with that, there's only so much we can do. You're going to have to learn, you know, school of hard knocks this way. And I'm sure you've gone through that, through those pain points. Can you kind of, maybe there's a CRA right now watching, I don't know, somewhere in Atlanta. Okay. And she's saying, wow, I think I can do what Ada did too. What advice, what warnings do you have for her? Let's give the warnings first because we don't want to give just the good stuff. The good stuff we know is you're going to have your own site, you're going to be independent, you're going to make a lot of money, you don't have to travel, you're going to tell coordinator what to do. What's the bad stuff?
You know, one of the reasons I was really looking forward to doing this is because I wanted the opportunity to present a different perspective than what's often shown or than what people perceive being a site owner is. Yes, you think that with the immense amount of knowledge that you have as a CRA and the immense amount of interactions that you've had as a CRA, that you're able to take those skills and transfer them to building a study site. And it's far from it. Yes, does the knowledge come in helpful? Does it come in handy? That you understand FDA, IRB, regulatory, GCP, yes, that's great, but that doesn't build your site. That's the foundation and the basis of your site, but that doesn't build up a structure where not only are you awarded studies, but you're able to execute them. And it's a total different thing working from that side. And the challenges that we saw, we hadn't expected it because yes, did I go in with a false sense of, I've been in this industry, I know what's up? Absolutely,
Which is
absolutely.
typical of most CRAs.
And listen, I'd seen site owners on your platform that had never been in the field.
Right.
So I'm like, if they can make it, then my gosh, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, yes, I walked in a little bit cocky. And after having, of course, done some consultancy work with you and Chris, and you guys walking me through what the process is, just kind of reiterating what I'd kind of already picked up from your channel. I walked in believing that this was going to be a walk in the park. But then it wasn't. I joined, as you said, under your network in 2018, July.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't go in by myself. I took a lot of advice from you with the different ways to set up. And I decided not to do a standalone on my own, buying all this equipment. I decided to partner with a doctor who had a clinic already. Mm-hmm. So in terms of that type of investment, I didn't need to worry about that. And of course, the doctor had never done research, so I gave him this, I bulleted everything and how we're gonna make millions and this and that. And he was game. He's like, okay, let's do this. So in 2018, we got started. I partnered with him and I brought on board a finance guy as well, so that we could just do things right from the beginning, right? I didn't want that aspect to get muddied or, a little bit confusing. And so we went straight ahead and did all the things that were needed to get set up and started waiting for sponsors.
Yeah, waiting for them to roll in. Come
yeah, to roll on
on,
in.
guys.
And we were using your services as well. So you guys were submitting on our behalf, but we were also looking ourselves. But we were just sure, being in Chicago, having everything we need, we knew we would pass PSV, pre-site visitation. We knew we had everything in place. We had a doctor who was a family practitioner, so he had a wide variety of patients he was seeing. The database had every type of therapeutic area you could think of. And we had also connected with a potential sub-Is who were in specialty areas that could also come on board. So we thought we were ready. And we applied, we applied, we applied, and we applied. We looked up, and I wrote this down because I was so traumatized. It's amazing I'm the way I am now. I was so traumatized at the time at how difficult, how challenging this was. So we started July 2018. By March 2019, 8 months later, I'm like, SOS, Dan, what's going on? We wrote you, we couldn't understand, and you couldn't understand it either. You're like, this is not average, this is not typical. Let's meet. And so we met, we talked about particular strategies, decided to redo things a little bit, and then we got back into the field. And I remember in April, you asked for our PI's resume to make sure highlighting things the way they should be highlighted with regards to his background, so they're not being over. It's a part of sponsors wanting to talk to your PI, right? By 10th month and no study, we had another meeting and discussed these things. This is about, almost a year in. I had asked, so what follow-up like with submissions? And you said, you know what? I don't normally do this, but because this is such an odd situation, I'm personally going to make sure I do follow-ups.
Oh, I forgot
For
about
your
that. I did
submissions.
forget about
I'm
that.
sure you did.
Wow.
Dan is a hands-on man, okay?
I don't like to, but
So,
if I see
no.
struggling like
You made it clear. You wanted our success. And that was the big thing to you. You took this very personal, which I appreciated very much. So you started to do the follow-ups of submissions and so on. And we came close a couple of times, but they didn't go with us. They decided not to go with us. In the meantime, you were making sure we had everything in place, like our SOPs. You would ask questions, are your SOPs in place? Is everybody GCP certified? Like, you were on top of making sure, have you done what you need to do? So by the time we get a sponsor, you're ready.
the next step was coming to Chicago to be there for a site selection visit.
Absolutely,
absolutely. A few more months, done it.
Yes. I mean, we were strategizing all the time. By November, we still didn't have. This is November 2019, so we're talking about a year and 4 months. We still didn't have a study. So you offered interns. You said, you know what, Ada? We've got students who need the opportunity to have some hands-on exposure. We'll reach out to our network and see if anybody's willing to, also jump in, find studies, do the follow-ups, and just be consistent. Listen, Dan, I don't know, whoever's listening, if you want a cheerleader, Dan is the man.
Thank you.
And I'm not exaggerating because I wasn't. Now, Chris is the sarcastic one. Chris is like, oh, I don't know, Ada, and Dan's like, no, you can do this, Ada. You can do it. Start characters. If you want practicality, Chris is your guy. If you want someone who's like, listen, you want Dan, okay? So Dan offered.
Make it freaking happen. MIFH is my new acronym. Make it freaking happen.
There you go. That's so true. That is so true. That is you. That is absolutely you. So you gave us the access to the interns, and by November they were up and running. January, this is now January 2020.
Wow.
Yes, 2020. So now we are a year and a half in, and no study. Well, what happened was you checked in, We saw what the interns were doing, and Julie was still submitting fast and furiously on our behalf. And in February, basically a year and 7 months later, we got the first real interest with the diabetes study in February. We eventually got that study. And then we got a cancer study, a database study, a few months later after that. And I remember what you had said is usually by the time you get the one, then a few months later, within the next 3 months, it's typical to get another two. And that's actually what happened. I don't know what it is in the atmosphere that door opened.
It snowballs. I think
It snowballs.
they share a database. Like when one sponsor or CRO puts you in, then the other ones kind of tap into it, is what I think happened.
That must be it. Because all of a sudden, we were actually getting bites, like people were reaching out to us. And so we got the cancer study, the database cancer study. We got a meningitis study. So we got our first study in February. By August, we now had 3 studies. Then in that same month of August, because we're trying to make up for lost time, we were running at a loss. We had staff. And so we were like trying to get as many studies as we can. And that's when the famous study, COVID study, came along. And, the numbers looked great. We thought, we could cover a lot of our expenses with this study. And it was the height of COVID. So we're like, this will be easy peasy. And we took that study. And we actually poured all kinds of energy into that study because it was such an easy study to enroll for. And so we spent a good amount of time on that study starting from August. And then after that, we still got other studies. We got STI studies, hypertension, asthma, and we continue. We're actually turning down studies now.
Oh, you're turning down studies now.
Because we just, because they're all coming at about the same time, which is screening and enrollment. And as you know, that's one of the most challenging times of a study. It takes a lot of time and energy before you go into the maintenance stage. And when you have too many happening at once, you overextend your staff. And so we kind of had to slow down a little, make sure we kind of get some of those studies out of that stage and into maintenance. And then we'll go back to getting them. But it's just amazing that we're turning down studies, after such a dry spell. So
Imagine
really,
telling your former self 2 years ago, hey, I'm going to be turning down studies in June 2021.
I wouldn't have believed it. I wouldn't have believed it. I mean, we were thirsty. Okay. We were thirsty for studies. And 2020 was our year. 2020, a year and a half after we started utilizing your service, 2020. I was like,
wow.
But the main thing in all of that, there were so many times I wanted to give up. And like I said again, and I'm not exaggerating, and there's no need for me to do so. There's 2 things that kept me. I knew it was a viable business. I'd seen it work. I'd been in the industry long enough. It exists. It wasn't a fallacy. I knew it was a viable business. But 2, the cheerleader in Dan, that just played a huge role in really, Dan, I don't think you've ever doubted that we would eventually be successful. And that really helped.
I think I told you, you've given enough time. Just, I don't know what the financial situation is. Obviously, you can't pay staff to sit around forever, but if given enough time, you're going to get studies. I knew that. It's just sites typically get in trouble by overhiring during those periods. And then, they have to let go, because you can't manage a payroll with no revenue coming in very long. I mean, that's just, no matter how much cheerleading happens, the money's going to run out, right? But the perseverance, if you could figure out the money part, the patience, just make it last, wait long enough, it's going to happen. And I think that's what I was telling you also. And then I think I don't know the details, but I know when clients take a little longer to get study, we'll typically work for free, which is not something we necessarily advertise, but usually.
I wasn't going to say that because I was like, maybe he won't want me to say that, but I'm going to say it. Let me tell you. He actually,
guys, it has to be legit.
And you knew it was legit. You knew we were doing the work. We showed you what we were doing. You knew it wasn't a situation where we were just sitting back. No. And it's like, well, come on. You knew. And
Yep.
so you actually stopped charging us for a time frame. And that was why we were able to stay afloat, you
Mm.
know, because we needed your services to help with the submissions and the search finding and the fact finding and the follow-up, but we couldn't afford it at a point in time.
I know.
So that was all a big part of.
Jeez. So what do you think? Where do you think, like, if you could do it over again, like, what? Maybe we don't know the answer. Like, why did it take so long? Do you think? What would you have done differently if you can go back?
What I would, and I know, I think that I walked in with the assumption of what I know. And I think that I should have taken a little more time to go over what you've shared with us, because what you share is voluminous. It really is. And I don't think I always dove in to the detail. And one of those things was, you know, not just the submissions, but the follow-ups and how to find them and how to do your feasibility questionnaires and all of that. And even though you were helping us with them, if we had focused more on understanding that very well, we could have also been doing those on our own. And so I think two things for me is really arming yourself with the knowledge that your network shares. And then two, from day one, be on point with follow-up.
hmm.
Following up with everything, the writing to the sponsors, the submitting feasibilities, the submissions to studies, really go hard. At one point, you had us on a schedule, because when we were explaining, you're like, you know what, I'm not really seeing you guys have consistency in the way you follow up. I see you following up, but there's no consistency. So those kind of things, I think if we had done it from the get-go, because Chicagoland is competitive.
It get a lot worse,
There are
too, right?
established PIs out here. So
Mm.
we needed to stand out some way.
But now you guys making a name for yourselves, and
Oh, we have a couple of studies that we're the only ones in the whole Midwest area, Indiana, Chicago, Wisconsin, Iowa, that have the study. We're the only ones.
there you go, turning down studies too. So what's the next step for Eagle? Because it'd be nice to get to the point where you don't have to turn down studies unless you know you actually can't do them well. What's the next step for you? Like, because now I always tell site owners, look, and myself too, myself included, you're gonna go from one challenge to the next. You're gonna meet, as soon as we're done recording, you're gonna meet the person who's sitting right here. They're learning how to start a site somewhere in the South.
Hmm.
All alternate after we record. But I always tell them, look, when you start out, the first problem is get revenue, then get profitable, then the problems become way more complex, because those are, at the end of the day, it doesn't seem like it at the time, but those are simple problems. I need more studies so I can make more revenue.
So
Those
it
are simple.
seems.
It gets complex later. It gets
Yes.
like, I need another PI because I don't want to be too dependent on one. I need more staff. I need to keep my staff. I need to train them better. There's not enough trained staff. I need to groom them myself. The problems become more complex. And that's the next step. And then your systems have to grow. Now you got to like start building not just SOPs, but like manuals for your employees so that the business can work without Ada's involvement as much. Right? That's where it gets complex. Isn't that the beginning is like scary because you need money, but the stress doesn't go away. It just changes to something else.
And you hit the nail on the head. This is a business with human beings as capital. And with that comes personalities, with that comes different work ethics, with that comes different levels of experience. And so we want to, one, expand by hiring more staff, but we need to make sure it makes sense. I've looked at sites and I realized some sites give their study coordinators a really heavy load with regards to protocol. I never want to be that site, because as a monitor, I knew how that didn't make sense. I knew how it impacted my work when I worked with a coordinator that had 10 protocols and wasn't an expert on any.
So this is where your CRA background is going to be an asset for you too.
Absolutely. And so for me, for my site, I don't want any of my coordinators to have more than 5 protocols. And they can't all be in the same stage. So it's managing that and making sure that they all have the right workload And then if we bring on more staff, that it makes sense financially. And what's going to make it make sense? This is the one thing I'm going to start exploring. I'm going to need to tap into your knowledge with regards to that, is really finding good patient recruitment support.
I got a guy.
Because the basis of a study is the patient recruitment. You can have 10 studies, but if you're not recruiting patients, they're sitting fallow. And that's our challenge right now. That is our challenge, I will say. So I need to set up a conference call with you about that.
There's a couple vendors. There's one that a guy who's a member of my YouTube Premium. He has agency that does Facebook ads. So I'll introduce you to him. We're starting to work with him at 2 of my sites. And then the person sitting next to me, they have a experience with several vendors that are doing well for them. So we'll share that with you right now, but we can't identify this individual right now. He's here. I don't know, he or she is here. Yeah, Ada will see them soon, but the rest of you can't see. Okay,
so that's next. That's next.
Yeah.
Expanding in staff.
Next is more exciting though, because I've been where you're at. And by the way, I'm starting a site again in Yuma from scratch, Yuma, Arizona.
Wow.
And just
that's
like
where I want to be. I want to have a network of sites all over the place.
Well, I'm gonna do what you did though. I'm gonna go into the doctor's office. You know, I had the meetings with him. He sent me a CV today, actually said, let's start applying. I moved there next month. I'm going to train my niece on how to be a coordinator. I'm going to do it. And luckily they have patient population, but we're going to get to the point where we exhaust that no matter how big the database is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then the staffing too. The staffing is another problem, but that stuff is the stage you're at is where it gets fun, because it's not fun what you've done up to this point. You're stressed out, you know. Now it could get fun. It's still stress, but it's a different kind of stress. It's you have a base, you know, you know where you've been, so you don't want to go back to that place.
Right.
So it's a matter of building. It gets more exciting. And by the way, a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with this, stay where you're at right now for the rest of their career. I can do 8 studies a year. I'm making more than I did as a CRA, and I'm way less stressed. I stay home. I work home. I don't fly. I don't go to airports. You know, I'm just in one place. And people like that, and that's great. Nothing wrong with that. But there are people, and you're one of them, who wants to keep building. You know.
Yes.
And that's, to me, that's where it gets fun.
It's
but
satisfying.
You're past the danger zone. Now you can either coast and be chill for a while, or you can just grow and then you're not chill. There's no chill at that point. So speaking of no chill, this is a good segue. Do you want to talk about this famous scam study, or do you want to chill on that one?
Oh no. No. I'm very happy to talk about that, because I would not want anyone else to go through what I went through. Yes. And this was totally based on being naive.
Yes.
Because there were obvious red flags that I should have seen that would make me steer clear of this company. And what I want to say, especially to new site owners, especially if you're finding yourself in a position where you're really, really hungry for a new study, it's better to have 0% of nothing than 0% of something than 100% of nothing. And with this company, they're called Romark. They were based in Florida. And Florida already has a sorry name in industry when it comes to research. So they didn't help matters, but they presented a COVID study that was pretty simple. It really was. You had to either have just a cough or cold symptoms or be, COVID positive. So it was very easy to enroll people. But the red flags were the way they structured, for instance, their contract. You are paying the patients out of your pocket and they're reimbursing you. Each patient in this study, I remember overall for their visits, it's $900 per patient. And we were cutting checks to these patients for all of their visits. And the cycle for payment, even though there was a contract in place, was not being honored by Romark. Not only that, the data that they asked us to provide, we would provide it. And after providing it, payment was still not being rendered. And so we went months in to this study, just doing it on good faith. And we started this study in August. By December, we had not been paid anything. August of 2020, we had not been paid anything. And when we spoke with them, we had done everything we were supposed to do. There was one excuse or the other given, still in good faith, not believing there would be anybody in the industry who would just not honor their part of the process. We were giving them everything they requested. We continued seeing the subjects, believing that, eventually there would be a payout. And so we paid for everything. We funded their study for them and paid for everything we did, labs, everything. We paid for it. It got to a point where they had decided to shut down the study earlier. And in deciding to shut down earlier, they now asked us to prepare for closeout. And I'm like, wait a minute, we haven't even gotten paid for screening and enrollment. We haven't gotten paid for IMVs. We're not going to begin the process of closeout without some type of compensation. And so we kind of went back and forth on that. Labs were asking us to return things. The companies were asking us to return kits. We put our foot down and said, we're not going to do any of that until there's some type of remuneration.
Yeah.
At that point, we did our research. We decided to look up the company because we couldn't believe that there was a pharmaceutical company that would behave like this. And we found out, one, that they had filed, in bankruptcy, that they had been kicked out of the building the corporate building that they'd been in for years. They couldn't pay their rent. So all kinds of odd things were going on with regards to this company. So that's when we dug our foot even more, that there's no way we're going to give over any data. And they came calling saying, hey, we've got this financial backer. They will help us to pay you off, but they won't do that until you give us data that we can show, the outcome of the result of this.
And at that point, it doesn't make sense either, because why would you, if they're showing efficacy or safety, whatever, like, I don't know the details, why would you end the study and not let the data continue? Usually they end the study if the data, if there's no efficacy.
Absolutely. It didn't make sense, but we were in between a rock and a hard place. As you remember, we hadn't had a study in a while. And so we brought our team on board and they did some negotiations. And then eventually we agreed to release the data. And they did not fulfill or honor the negotiations that were in place. And when I say up to the president called us and really said, listen, we've got you, we're going there, but we can't do anything. Our hands are tied unless we have this data. I mean, they really pled their case, and they had their finance guy on, the chief financial officer. And they really, and again, like I said, red flag, these were people who were ignoring our emails before. All of a sudden, now you needed this, and all of you were on our phone. All of you were on our emails. But we also were new in the industry, and so we wanted to do the right thing. And so we gave it over. Till today, they have not paid us. We have sent a letter through our attorney to them. And they have a certain amount of time frame. I think it ends this month. And then we'll see what next steps are. And I think what they're looking at or hoping is, it's going to end up costing us more to take them to court or whatnot, versus just letting it go. And I think they're hoping for that. But I'm still believing that we can find some type of resolution, because I understand we're not the only site that, there are sites all over the US that went through this. And I think, like I said, the red flag was paying for things out of our own pocket. And going forward, unfortunately, we're not going to deal with any more small biotech companies.
No.
Unfortunately, for authentic biotech companies. The studies we have right now.
Because I wrote an article on this. I think the real red flag with me, obviously the stuff you said, red flag. When I started this, just to give people context, Only two of our clients have this study. We have like 50 to 70 clients right now across the country. So Ada and someone else who we're going to talk to later, um, we learned about this study through you guys. So then I was like, okay, whatever. Okay. And I was even thinking, hey, this seems like a good study. Why don't I get it for one of my sites? This was the
Mm-hmm.
UMA site, but then
Mm-hmm.
things with that PI fell through, or else I would have gotten this study too. That would have been my first study. And I would have gone gung ho on it also.
Absolutely.
To me, when I started hearing more things from you, another guy I know that's not a client, and my other client, I was like, let me look into this. They're not publicly traded, which was
Mm-hmm.
the biggest red flag to me. So the small biotechs, they're fine to work with if they're publicly traded, like if they're actually listed on the stock market, right? That means they have access to public funds. They're not going to run out of money for one or two studies. So you're generally safe with that. And publicly traded companies do have a fiduciary obligation to pay their stakeholder, which are their vendor, unless they go bankrupt. Romark, then they're not publicly traded, so they're getting their financing who knows where. And apparently, no investor is going to want to invest in a drug that doesn't show efficacy, because why else will they pull the plug? But we
Yeah.
do know Romark has money because we know another. You can mention them if you want. I won't, because they're a direct competitor. There's a consulting company.
Pharmacy.
There you go.
Yeah.
They have sites, and they're bigger than us, and they have more muscle, um, meaning more attorneys. Their sites
Mm-hmm.
got paid. We know that their sites got paid. So who knows what they did? We can talk off camera about strategies. I have a few that I was talking to with one of the other sites. So after we record, we can talk if you have time, Ada.
That would be great. That would be great.
I have some ideas, but I don't know. I mean, it's a long shot, but it better than
Everything is a long shot with them. Like I said, I've been a little bit gun shy with smaller biotech companies. All the companies we have currently are huge brand names you recognize companies, and there've been no problem at all.
But you're resilient, because like to have this study come after what, almost 2 years of
Yeah.
not having a study, and then you got thank God you got some other studies that did pay, so you can
Yes.
absorb the losses of this. But you're resilient, because this doesn't stop you, and you're still turning down studies now. Put in context, people are like, oh, how can you be so naive? Look, guys, we're in the middle of COVID, which is once in a century event. The industry was super excited. There was so much work.
Yes.
If you heard COVID, you basically heard like money. This is like vaccine treatment, prophylactic, all that stuff. So you didn't really care. You're like, all right, let's do it. This is COVID. The red flags might be here. Maybe sounds too good to be true, but also we're in a once in a century event. It's not going to happen again for another century, probably. So let's try it. I would have done the same thing. I don't think it's a matter of being naive. I think the context is important to put in.
The context. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Right. And many sites came on board,
More than
and
we
some
know.
of them quite experienced.
I was on the I hypothetically heard through the grapevine, let's just put it that way, the town hall meeting they had with their other site network, and there were a bunch of sites on there, but then somebody asked, well, what about the other sites who are not part of this network? And the CEO gave some kind of roundabout and basically saying no. So we know they got some money to pay their. We'll talk about that. But resilient, like, how are you so resilient? So many people would have quit.
Yes.
What made you not quit after?
And I had to talk to my partners. Yeah, I had to talk to my partners, because they're like, enough is enough. Telling them, listen, I've been in the industry long enough. I think that the resilience is because I've been in the industry. If you're from outside the industry, it would be easy to be like, this isn't for me. But I knew the potential.
How did you, because
Mhm.
now your partners, your partner, I'm assuming, are research naive, or at least at the time they were.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking, okay, this is similar to me and my new doctor in Arizona. Like right now, he's trusting me. He doesn't watch YouTube, doesn't know who I am.
Mhm.
He's trusting me that I know what I'm doing. So if
Yes.
I were to go almost 2 years with no studies, but I'm just in his office, working, and then I get a study, I get like 4 studies, but one of them doesn't pay. We're actually losing money.
Yeah.
He would be like, Dan, what are you doing? Now I'm starting to go to bed, right? So how did you
Yes.
get past this?
It was being able to call the meetings, be transparent with the team about what has occurred, but also balance it out with the fact that we have these other amazing studies and we have the opportunity to make up for our losses here. The good thing, like I said, was we didn't go out and rent a standalone building and buy equipment and all of those. So we were blessed to have a bit of a cushion in terms of expenses, overheads, because it was a clinic anyway. It was where he was seeing patients anyway. Those bills were getting paid anyway. So the office space he gave me in there, it was being paid for anyway.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really taking a lot of money out of his pocket, although as partners, we came up with money that we fronted, and that was the money that was used to pay out these people for the Romark study. So unfortunately, that occurred, but luckily we had the other studies that were able to help us even out the amount of damage that occurred as a result. So we didn't have to go to each other and say, bring out more money and invest. We didn't have to, because the other studies were able to make up for that.
That shows you how the studies are worth it in the end, because you got basically 4 studies that are not only paying for themselves and enough profit for the last 2 years of not doing anything, but also absorbing the tremendous losses from this Romark disaster,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So
It's
that
still a
shows,
big old red line in our spreadsheet. It's a red line.
it's a good
But
tax
we're
write-off.
believing. We're believing.
It's a good tax write-off if nothing else. But man, it's not over, Ada. We still got a fighter's chance. I got some
That's
ideas.
right.
You're not alone.
That's right.
I know 2 other, actually, here's the thing. You and our other client, okay, that's the ones I talked to. But there was another random person on YouTube after I wrote the article, and he said he has a site. If you're watching this, reach out to me, because I forgot who you were, because I don't know him. But he said he's willing to group a bunch of sites together. Also, I don't know if I sent an email at
Awesome.
the time, but yeah, there's others out there that we don't even know that were in. So
Yeah.
if we're involved with Romark, reach out to me, and I'll put a group together. I'm not getting involved legally, but I'm gonna help you guys network with one another,
Absolutely.
so you can pursue what you got to do. At least get something back.
And this again goes to back up what I'm saying to everyone listening, is that Dan takes this very personal. I don't think it's about the money for him. I mean, he has his own sites, lots of them, and he's generating income from those. But he really does want to see our success. And you can imagine a situation that he's not technically involved in, and yet he wants to be a connector and make sure, that there's some type of resolution. So just appreciate you all the time, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. If we have one or two clients involved or more, obviously, we gotta do what we can to help you guys out. So we'll definitely talk. But Ada, what an amazing story! I mean, this is like a soap opera from the
A telenovela.
Latino telenovela. Geez, and the best is yet to come. I think you guys are gonna have a bright future with the Eagle, and we have the LinkedIn link underneath the show notes. If you're listening, it's on the show notes. If you're on YouTube, it's underneath the video, so you can check out Eagle, connect with Ada, and then we'll do a follow up in a year or so
Absolutely.
to see how you've been growing.
Absolutely.
What are your plans for the future? Like what are for the next 2 years?
Like I said, well, we're at 6 figures now. At least we're operating at 6 figures. And I want to get into the 7-figure range. So that's expansion. And we're looking forward to doing that.
That's awesome. 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 So thank you very much, Ada, for your time. Yeah, we
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. It's good to showcase stories like this, that you're a success story, but you took the scenic view. You took
Right.
the toll road, the express lane. You were
Yes,
stuck in heavy traffic, sig alerts everywhere.
that's
But
right.
you made it through, and
Okay.
now it's just starting. Now it's just starting,
Yeah.
and chances are there won't be another row mark in your career because
Oh,
never dealt with
I'll
one.
I'll see them a mile off. Trust me.
Yeah, we will. We will. The only potential risk is if there's another biotech bubble burst like it happened in '07. I
Oh.
remember a biotechs, they all, because the biotech bubble and then the huge not great recession, what's it called? The last great recession, whatever it was in '07, the
Hmm.
biotech bubble popped along with everything else. And a lot
Right.
of those
Housing market and everything.
house, yeah,
Yeah.
subprime. A lot of those biotechs went bankrupt and didn't pay sites. Luckily, I was not a site that didn't get paid, but I knew of sites back then. So this is something that can potentially reoccur. In the case of Romark, that's not the case. They're doing this in an environment where money is plentiful.
Hmm.
So this is different. This is a
Oh
different
yeah.
case. They're a
Oh yeah.
special breed altogether. Uh,
Very, very,
but we look
very.
forward to more interviews with you, and um,
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share my story and my perspective. Because sometimes people don't want that out there. So that's, allows for transparency. So people really do know what they're getting into, and take the time to really do their research. So they're ready for things like any type of pitfalls that I ran into.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ada. Thank you, everybody, for watching, listening, especially my live audience member here. He's very he's here eating popcorn and watching, right? Thank you, guys. Talk to you later. Bye bye.